Hey, this is Jonathan from SyniteAudio, and today we'll be looking at an interesting way of using the Bento Box for mods. So since that is the key of this video, let's drag one in. Now what we'll be doing is actually clocking the for mods at a much faster rate than would otherwise. And I'm just going to bring in a node in as a sort of hint. So what we're going to be doing is actually taking a Bento Box oscillator, feeding the pitch of the node in into the Bento Box oscillator, and we'll be using this as a driver, clock driver for the for mods. So I'll call it clock driver. And we're going to be taking the pulse output of the clock driver, in this case our Bento Box oscillator, and running it into the Bento Box for mods. Wow, someone's car outside is really going crazy. So what this does is now we are going to be clocking the Bento Box for mods at audio rate, which will allow us to do some really interesting stuff with this block. So first off, we are going to put a VCA, an ADSR, hook those up, gate, and we are going to also get a scope, pitch coming from the utility node in, and finally we're going to also grab a Bento Box mix, because we're going to take the four outputs of the four mods, run that into a mixer, and we're going to do a multiplication and do ×2. This is because at most we are going to be running the Bento Box in bipolar mode, and when it's in bipolar mode, the Bento Box only outputs +5 to -5 values. So you want to turn that into a -1 to +1 swing, essentially. Clean up my panel a little bit. Alrighty, so this is the patch we're going to be making. Very, very, very simple. It's only conceptual anyways, so we're going to do the clock driver. We're going to put our Bento Box for mods. We're going to go into the ADSR, VCA, and the mixer right after the for mods. So this is all that our patch is going to look like. So very first thing, what we're going to do is we're going to click bipolar on all of the for mods. Alrighty. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to up the clock driver to 32. So 32. Actually, let's see. So it goes 0, 12, 24, 36. My bad. We're going up 3 octaves. So what this will do is because the Bento Box, since we're clocking the for mods at audio rate and we're using an oscillator, we have to take into account that it's going to go 8 steps, 8 steps for a full. Okay, so what we're going to be using the Bento Box for is for wave shapes. So we're going to be using the Bento Box at audio rate to create 4 wave shapes, essentially turning the 4 mods into a 4 oscillator. So I'll just rename this 4 oscillator. And so what we have to take into account is to get the same sort of pitch from a clock, the oscillator running at standard pitch intervals. We have to clock the for mods much faster because you have to take into account that it takes 8 swings of the oscillator to get 1 full round of the for mods at 8 steps. So now that we have this going on, we can also enable glide for all of the lanes as well. So let me do that real quick. And we're going to bring the VCA up a bit, give it a bit of release. So if I press a note, I should get, yeah, just a click. Really nothing more. So now what we can do is, using the 4 mods, and the beauty of the 4 mods in bipolar mode is we can actually sort of draw in the wave shape that we want. So we can do a very simple 1, 2, 3, 4 up and 4 down. And now we have our pulse. I'm going to do relative mode so that when I blend, when I bring in the other wave shapes, the other 3 lanes, that the volume will stay constant. But now we have a pulse oscillator. Pulse oscillator coming from the lane 1 of 4 mods, and we have to adjust the fact that it is 36 so that we get the appropriate scope. So here we can see if we run this at 0, we're not even going to get 1 cycle in the scope, even though the scope is based on, so it's locked to the pitch that we're playing. So right now it's really, really low, and we want, since the pitch is set to ×2 or 2 cycles, we just have to adjust and bring the pitch up until it matches the 2 cycle interval set in the scope. And now we've got ourselves the first lane. So there's a bit of aliasing going on because we're running it's not an oscillator itself, so there's no anti-aliasing methods implemented in 4 mods, since it's originally meant for control voltages, but since we're clocking it at a audio rate, we're getting audio rate signals, so we're getting oscillators out of it. So we can draw, so now we have a pulse, but we can also just alternate this however we want. And that's sort of the beauty of having the scope as well, is that you can see what you're doing. So we also enabled glide on all of the steps, which means that we can smooth this wave shape out. So if we start increasing the milliseconds a little bit, start to see in the scope, it smoothens it out. The other interesting thing worth noting is that the glide isn't set to the note in per se, so that way, so if you have it set to a specific value of, let's say, 0.69 milliseconds at lower notes, you'll see it smooths, but at higher notes it smooths more, so you can get sort of key scaling in the smoothing. And then if you use the pitch value into mod A, and then use mod A to control the amount of glide, so we can do really low notes. Let me see. So that we want that note to be down here with this amount of glide. And as we go higher up, obviously that amount of glide is going to impede the notes that we're playing, so we want to mod it so it goes down relative to the note we're playing. And now at least it's somewhat constant to the key and to the note we're playing, so it's sort of pitch tracked. I just repeated myself a couple of times there, but it's essentially what you're doing is you're pitch tracking it. You're setting how much the note value is going to impact the glide, and if you do that in a negative way, then the higher up on the keys you play, the less glide there's going to be. But because the oscillator is moving at a faster rate, you're essentially going to have the same amount of glide present relatively. But you can also use that to your advantage, where you have more glide on the low notes and less glide on the higher notes. So the low notes will be smoother and fatter, and then the higher notes will be a little bit more tinny, and in this case very pulsy, because what's coming out of the 4 mods is stepped. You're getting stepped 8 shapes. Oh, that was very alias up in that higher range. Okay, so let me turn that off and bring that down. We'll just do a regular pulse for now. And now we can do lane 2. So let's draw something in lane 2. We'll do, let's say, the same pulse. So we have the same square wave running, but we're going to add some harmonics. So let's disable 1 for now, bring up 2, and let's do pitch on the sync for the scope, because that way it doesn't wig out essentially, because we're just tracking the overall syncing or the oscillator of lane 2 of the 4 mods in the scope based on the pitch value, instead of it trying to determine the cycle count, when here we have obviously more than just 1 cycle. So we're going to give so let's do that guy, and now we can bring in so actually let's go back 100% on the original lane 1, so our pulse, our fundamental essentially. Let's bring down 2, unmute 1, and start bringing in 2 to get that harmonics. You can also smooth 1 again, don't forget. Do 3 as well, so let's bring in 3 a bit. You can even do like a well, the most you can get here is 4 up, down, 4 down, so we could do a full 1, -1, +1, -1, +1, and then alternate that, and that will give us, if we mute 2 and 1, just this really fast, much higher harmonic. So we can bring that in, smoothen that out quite a bit. And then 4 we can even do just a single blip here, so we're negative, and then let's just do maybe 2. And we won't even smooth on that one. So fun things that you can do now after having all these wave shapes, and this is fun to play with, yes, is you can also do the mixing on the Bento Box mix itself, so you can play around with the phase flip and see what starts sounding good or not. So that gives us a bit bigger of a bottom end, changes the timbre a bit. I actually kind of like that. That sounds pretty good. We can increase the CI. And now we can actually do some fun stuff. So after we have our oscillator, our generator, so to speak, now we can just bring in like a filter. So I can go do, let's say, boutique, dual SKF. So we get a nice grungy filter out of it. So go in, run pitch, maybe even run FM from Bento Box mix as well. And so then we can start playing around with that as well. Ooh, actually, let me get my envelope, run that in mod A, so we can get some filter sweeps. Add some key tracking. Ooh, nice. But yeah, that's essentially one way to use the Bento Box 4 mods as a 4 oscillator generator, with each of the lanes being a different wave shape, and then you can play around with the glide. And this is just being all driven by a Bento Box oscillator. We're using the clock, or not, we're using it as a clock, but we're using the pulse output, and we have to remember to match the semitones to go up or down octaves to match your scope settings. So in this case, we're 2 oscillations per for the scope, so we're doing it times 2, so it means it's going to show 2 oscillations. Then we just match that with the semitones here, so you're doing 36 to get 2 oscillations in the scope, which will match the pitches and everything accordingly. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe if you have, and there'll be more videos coming out. And yeah, hope you have a nice day. Thank you.